All right, let's talk about using a scanner to read data from a file. So we've created scanner objects before, but in this case, we're going to create a scanner object. Instead of looking at the console, we're going to create a scanner that's looking at a file. We can also create a scanner that looks at a string. If we have a long string, we can do that too. We can use scanner on it. It has a close method, and then it has a bunch of methods for reading data from the file. We have a has next, which is a Boolean, to make sure that the scanner has something to read. It could be at the end of the file and may not have anything left to read. So we need to check to make sure that we're not at the end of the file. Next, reads the next token as a string. And a token is a group of characters usually separated by some kind of delimiter. Normally that's a space. So it would get all the characters up to the next space. So this would read a string up into the next space in the file. But we can read the next byte, we can read the next short. So we're looking for a short integer or an integer or a long integer, or we're looking for a float, or we're looking for a double. These all require that we know what to expect in our file when we read it. Okay. But we can also use a delimiter. We can look for a pattern. The one thing that's missing from here that I think we use a lot that should probably be included here is next line. We can actually have it read line by line out of the file. That's a pretty common thing to do, especially with comma separated values or some kind of delimited values where you have multiple values on one line. You read the whole line and then you split it up. And I'll show you examples of that soon. So that's using a scanner. Let's look at an example of that, using scanner to read a file. So we have to import Java utility.scanner, of course, because we're going to use scanner. And in this case, we're creating a file object connecting us to the scores.txt file we wrote in the previous example. And then we create a new scanner. Instead of doing system in, like we've done many, many times, we're actually connecting to a file. And the scanner is going to read from the file. And the scanner, in this case, we're giving the variable input. So input is our scanner, so we call input.hasNext to ask the scanner, hey, do you have any more values coming up that we can read? And then in this case, we're reading input next. If you remember when we wrote the files, we were writing somebody's name followed by a space and a score. So next is going to get the next token. It's going to read that person's name up to that space and store it in first name. Then it's going to read the next token, which should be their middle initial. And then the next token, which should be their last name. And finally, the next token as an int, and store that in an integer called score. And then we're printing out their first name concatenated with their middle initial, last name, and the score. Now, this was basically what was in the file. So this is a spot where if this is all we needed, we could have done input.readLine and just printed out the results of the entire line at once. Okay, so there's two ways to do everything. If I need this data one item at a time, that's how I should do it. Get one item at a time. Or maybe I read the whole line in and use the whole line at once. Or I read the whole line in and split it after I read it in instead of relying on the scanner to split it. Because there are some more powerful ways to do that. But the process is pretty easy, and we always have to remember to close our scanner when we're done with it. So, opening the file, processing the file, in this case the process is reading it, and then closing the file. 3 parts always involved in a file.